Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to this session of Meezan lecture series. In the previous session, we had started off with the preaching Shariah, as has been mentioned in Ustaz Ghamidi's Meezan. We have seen that how his preaching obligation, the way it has been mentioned in the Quran, has been divided into various categories. So, as far as the first category is concerned, we studied that category, and that category actually owed to the preaching obligation of prophets of God. So it's this duty of preaching which has been divided into various categories, and regarding these categories, we have to be absolutely sure that what responsibility belongs to which category. So what we need to understand is that just as we are made to believe through certain arguments and reasoning about certain facts that we have to believe in, which we call articles of faith, and just as we have to do righteous deeds, on a very similar grounds, we have also been required to disseminate and spread the truths that we find for ourselves. However, this responsibility or the extent of this responsibility is different in different categories. So we had seen that these categories are 5 basically. So we have a category in which the preaching obligation of the prophets of God is mentioned. Then we have a category in which the preaching obligation of Abraham's progeny is mentioned. We have a category in which the rulers or the heads of state, they are given a specific task vis-a-vis preaching. Then we have the preaching obligation of the scholars. And lastly and fifthly, we have the preaching obligation of a common individual. So we need to find ourselves that in which category do we fall in, and then as a result our obligation and our responsibility will change. Last time we had seen that how when messengers of God, they deliver the truth to their foremost addressees, then a small court of justice or a miniature day of judgment is set up on the face of this earth. And the mission of messengers, it passes through various phases. We discussed those phases, and we had seen how the warning phase, then we had the enhanced warning phase, then we have the conclusive communication phase, in which the final warning is sounded and the truth is conveyed to its ultimate extent. And fourthly, we had the migration and acquittal phase, in which a messenger leaves his nation. And fifthly, the reward and punishment phase, in which the reward and punishment vis-a-vis the addressees of his nation takes place. And in this way, his preaching actually culminates into a worldly day of judgment, and as a result of which truth and falsehood are made distinct from one another. So now today we will go on to the next category, and that is the category that we call the category in which the preaching obligation of Abraham's progeny is described. So Abraham's progeny has a very special status in the Quran, and the Quran has said that if the progeny of Abraham, if they adhere to the truth, then they will lead all nations of the world. And if they deviate from it, they will be deposed from this position and will have to face the punishment of humiliation and subjugation. So you'll find that in Surah Baqarah, in the very beginning, they are reminded of this obligation by these words, Awfu bi ahdi, ufi bi ahdikum. Keep my covenant and I will keep yours. So this covenant in which they have to adhere to the truth is the covenant that was made by this, or this was granted to this nation or this progeny. And as a result, the Almighty said that if you do your part of the deal, then what I will do is that I will grant you the leadership of all the nations of the world. And it has been mentioned more specifically, as you can see, in Surah Hajj, which is the 22nd surah of the Quran. Let me read out the text before you, and I'm going to just confine myself to reading out its translation. So it says that, struggle for the cause of God in a befitting manner. He has chosen you for this responsibility and laid on you no burdens in the observance of your faith. He has chosen for you the way of Abraham your father. He has named you Muslims earlier and in this period of the last prophet as well. He has chosen you so that the prophet may bear witness against you, and that you yourselves may bear witness to this religion against other people of this world. So you see, this is how the Quran has mentioned this preaching obligation of Abraham's progeny, And also you can see that it was Abraham who had named this progeny as Muslim. So the Quran is specific that the word Muslim was given to his progeny. So Jews and Christians and Muslims, basically all of them were named as Muslims by him. I mean, because he was the progenitor, he was the forefather. So in this verse of Surah Hajj, the Quran specifies that just as the Almighty chooses certain great personalities from among the progeny of Adam for bearing witness to the truth, in a similar way, he has also chosen the progeny of Abraham for this responsibility of bearing witness to the truth, and has directed it to make an effort to fulfill all the requirements of this position. So this has been said in the following verse of the Quran in a very, very clear tone. It says, Inna Allah hastafa Adama wa Nuhan wa ala Ibrahima wa ala Imrana al alameen. God chose Adam and Noah and Abraham's progeny and the progeny of Imran above the people of the world, which means they were chosen for a particular task. So you see, you can clearly see the word Al Ibrahim. So Al Ibrahim is the progeny of Abraham. So Abraham's progeny has been given this task that they have to bear witness to the truth. So in the individual capacity, earlier on, just as Adam and Noah, I mean in their own individual capacity, this was a time when the various generations of mankind, they were spreading on the globe, and population was to a limited extent, and individual prophets were sent to various nations. But as this whole population aspect, it became more distinct, it became more noticeable, and people spread to various parts of the world. Finally, the Almighty, in the second phase, chose the progeny of Abraham, and then all prophethood, as you would recall, was confined to his progeny. And in this regard, Abraham's progeny has been given this duty to convey the truth. Now, this progeny of Abraham is that if they adhere to the truth, they will lead all nations. This is something of a given. And if we are able to understand this fact, we'll find that as far as the Quran is concerned, if you relate to the history, the way the Quran has mentioned this history, you'll find that the Quran actually said that Abraham was put through various trials and tests. Of course, the trial of his own nation, in which they decided to even burn him. Then the trial in which he had to migrate all the way from Iraq up to Palestine and to the land of Arabia. And then, of course, the greatest of the trials that he had to go through was that he was asked to sacrifice his son for this cause. So you see, these were trials that we can not even imagine the way he would have gone through. But when he was tried and he succeeded in this trial, the Almighty said that now He will grant him this position of leadership. So the Quran has said, as you can see, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا قَالَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي قَالَ لَا يَنَالُ أَحْدِ الظَّالِمِينَ. So, and recall when Abraham was put to trial by his Lord in a few things. And these few things, they are of course not mentioned here, but as I said, they are mentioned in various verses of the Quran. And we know that these trials were extreme trials, and he had to undergo a lot of consternation, a lot of we do feel that some of these trials they needed superhuman effort, and lo and behold, we found him giving this sterling effort on his own part. So it says that he tried him in a few things and he fulfilled them, which means that he was successful in these trials. So at this, God said, I have decided to appoint you the leader of mankind. I have decided to appoint you the leader of mankind. And then Abraham asked in a very innocent way, and what about my descendants? So, yes, thank you very much, God, that you have appointed me and rewarded me for my services, and in a way that I have been appointed a leader of mankind. But what about my descendants? Will they also occupy the same position? In other words, he was asking about his progeny. And the Almighty said that when this was asked by Abraham, the Almighty replied, my covenant does not apply to the wrongdoers. Which means that yes, this covenant which has been made with him will continue with his progeny as long as they too adhere to the truth, and also if they are given these responsibilities, then they fulfill these responsibilities. So this is how the Almighty actually has specified that just as individual prophets would be sent, and they were sent, the nation of Abraham, the progeny of Abraham, was given this special responsibility that as in its individual capacity, messengers delivered the truth to their ultimate extent. They became witnesses to the truth. Abraham's progeny, in its collective capacity, was made this witness of the truth. And we also know from history that first the progeny of Isaac was chosen for this purpose. And then when they did not fulfill this responsibility, then it was taken away from him and it was given to the progeny of Ishmael, and it was left to the last prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then to see through these responsibilities. So this is how the progeny of Abraham, which is divided into the Israelites and the Ishmaelites, it has been distributed, and such is the reward which is conferred upon them, that you'll find that this has been mentioned specifically for the Israelites, that if they fulfill their part of the deal, then look what will happen to them. It says, and if in their collective capacity had adhered to the truth, which means the Israelites had they adhered to the truth, which means to the Torah and the gospel, which means that, of course, such is their responsibility that 2 books were sent to the Israelites. So we know to Moses was sent the Torah, and to Jesus, both of them were prophets of the Israelites. Both of them were given these 2 books, and it is said that if they adhere to these 2 books in their collective capacity, what has been revealed to them from their God, they would have received the sustenance from above them and from beneath their feet. No doubt there is one group among them who is righteous, but those whose deeds are evil abound. So yes, there are people who would listen and they would follow the righteous path, but most of them would turn out to be evil people. Now you'll find that this precisely the same responsibility has been mentioned in Surah Teen as well. And the Quran has stated that the Mount of Olive, the village of Fig, the Mount of Sinai, and the city of Mecca all bear witness to this judgment. The Mount of Olive is the place where, after Jesus was lifted, the punishment of those who had rejected him was to continue until the day of judgment. It was also at this place that the Nasara, a new ummah from among the Israelites who professed faith in him, was constituted. Now, Fig is a village situated on this mountain. In the Bible, it is referred to as Beth Phage. And here the word phage is actually fig. It's exactly the same word. So it's only the pronunciation which is different in different languages. It was this place which is mentioned in Luke chapter 19, verse 29, that when Jesus came to Jerusalem, he stayed at this place before entering the city. So you see, this is another part of the Quran which mentions this responsibility in very, very distinct terms. It says that وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِينِينَ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينِ لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ غَيْرُ مَمْنُونٍ فَمَا يُكَذِّبُكَ بَعْدُ بِالدِّينِ أَلَيْسَ اللَّهُ بِأَحْكَمِ الْحَاكِمِينَ. The fig and olive bear witness, and so does the Mount of Sinai, and this secure city of yours, that we have created man at these places in the best of molds. Then we reverted him to the lowest position when he himself wanted to become low, except those who accepted faith and did righteous deeds. For them shall be a reward unending. Now, O Prophet, what is it that denies you about the day of judgment? Ask them, is not Allah the best of judges? So you see, once again, we find the Quran pointing out this responsibility, that look how these areas, they bear witness, the Mount of Sinai, the city of Mecca, and of course the place where we know that Jesus had stayed in that village, and of course the Mount of Olive. All these are places in which the progeny of Abraham, they were given this responsibility and their fate was made known. And very similarly, you'll find this reference regarding Prophet Muhammad when the Ishmaelites were given this responsibility. You'll find out this responsibility to be given both in Surah Baqarah and in Surah Al Imran. So in Surah Baqarah, the words are, so we formally talked about the Israelites when we were discussing وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ أَقَامُوا التَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ, the verse prior to this. And now we come to the Ishmaelites. which were, of course, the other branch of Abraham's progeny. And about them, the Quran says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. And I've discussed this elsewhere, that this is the part in Surah Baqarah in which this Ummah has been constituted, the Ishmaelites, and before them the Israelites were given this responsibility, and then they were deposed from this position because they did not discharge their responsibility. So it says, and similarly we have made you an intermediate community so that you be witnesses to the truth before the people, and the Rasul be such a witness before you. And then in Surah Al Imran, precisely the same responsibility has been mentioned in slightly different words. And by appointing the Ishmaelites to this position, it is said, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. You are the noblest community raised up for mankind to bear witness to the truth before it, because you urge each other to good and forbid evil, and you truly believe in God. So this verse, kuntum khayra ummatin, must be understood that it refers to the Ishmaelites, and in particular, when they were given this responsibility in the times of Prophet Muhammad, they were the Sahaba who were given this responsibility. So after them, of course, we know how this responsibility was shirked. It was not properly followed. It was not given the due that it should have been given, and this happened in various periods of time. But the Sahaba did honor this covenant, and we know until the situation existed in the Sahaba, they were governing in a governing situation, then these responsibilities were being discharged in a very faithful and sincere way. So also because of the fact that we know that the Quran speaks of individuals in a way, and that we have to realize that in the first part of our history, in which prophets of God were sent individually to various nations, we find them to be sent to individual communities. In this particular aspect, we find the difference being that now later on, with the advent of Abraham, it was now confined to his progeny, and now he was given this responsibility. But we need to understand one thing, that we must not confuse this with the shahada or the bearing of witness of prophets of God. So that is another aspect for which they are held accountable. So just as Jesus and Moses were prophets and messengers to the Bani Israel, and as such they were responsible for their worldly judgment, that is an entirely different matter. And now is another matter that we are discussing, and that is then in their collective capacity, there is another law which the Almighty has mentioned in the Quran, that if the progeny of Abraham it adheres to truth and justice, then for them is leadership, and that leadership will be provided to Abraham's progeny by God Himself in a way that He will make things work out for them. It's not that they are going to take up arms or work for that position as they did in the case of the previous category. So in the previous category, it was the messengers in their individual capacity who are being talked about. In this category, we are talking about the progeny of Abraham in their collective capacity. And the second difference is that in the first category, at times the whole issue of punishment is carried out from the hands of the believers at God's behest. So He gives this order, and as a result, the followers of a messenger, they follow him, and they do what is required of them. But in this case, there is no measure or step to be taken. Once that step is taken, which means that you have to adhere to truth and justice in your internal system as a collectivity, once that happens, then the Almighty says that I will make the circumstances such that the whole progeny of Abraham would prevail on other nations of the world. So you see, this distinction must be understood. Otherwise, we will end up confusing the nature of obligation of Abraham's progeny with the nature of obligation of individual messengers of God. And they belong to the pre-Abrahamic era and to the Abrahamic era both. So this has to be understood. And finally, I would also like to cite the Bible, in fact, the Torah, I would say, the book of Deuteronomy, which is the Pentateuch's fifth book. So this is chapter number 28, verses 1 to 25, and you'll see that how the Almighty has made this promise with them, with the Israelites in the book of Deuteronomy. It says, if you fully obey the Lord your God, if you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all His commands I give you today, this is Moses talking to them, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations on earth. So mark these words. So this is exactly what the Quran has said. It says that Inni faddaltukum alal alameen. We will elevate you as the leaders of all nations. You will lead them. And it is precisely this responsibility which is also mentioned in the Old Testament in these very, very clear words. So I'm just going to read them out again so that you can make note of them. So it is Moses telling the Israelites. What is he telling them? He says, if you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all His commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. Above all the nations of the earth. All these blessings will come upon you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. You will be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. The Lord will grant the enemies who rise up against you, the enemies who will rise up against you will be defeated before you. They will come at you from one direction, but flee from you in seven. Then all the peoples of the earth will see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they will fear you. The Lord will make you the head, not the tail. Again, this is a beautiful allusion to the fact that yes, they are going to lead people and people will follow them. And it's not that they will follow people. So he says that He'll be made you the head and not the tail. If you pay attention to the commands of your Lord your God that I give you this day and carefully follow them, you will always be at the top, never at the bottom. You see, this promise is repeated once again. And you can see that in the course of these 25 verses, this promise is repeated in different ways so that it is hammered into their minds that all that you need to do is to follow the Torah and the gospel. If you do that, then you will be granted the leadership of the whole world, the rest of the world. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail if you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day and carefully follow them. You will always be at the top, never at the bottom. However, now you see, this is the other part of the law. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all His commands and decrees I am giving today, all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. You will be cursed in the city and cursed in the country. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will come at them from one direction, but flee from them in seven. And you will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth. So you see, the promise is twofold. That if you adhere to truth and justice, if you adhere to the commands of God, then the Almighty will make you lead the rest of the nations. But if this is not so, it's not just they will not lead those nations. This is just one aspect. On the other hand, the Almighty says that He will make you an example before the rest of the nations. You will become a horror before them. And you will be cursed in the city and you will be cursed in the country. So you see, this is how the promise has been mentioned. So it's like a two-edged sword. It's not just the fact that they are to follow it and then they'll be given this kingdom or this leadership. No, if they don't follow it, it will be the reverse, that they will be at the bottom and other nations will lead them. And as far as they are concerned, they will be at the rock bottom. So you see how we come to this conclusion that as far as this preaching is concerned, that you have to understand that it's not mere preaching. It results in a miniature day of judgment on this earth. The history of this Shahada is that at the time of Noah, it started off, of course, with Noah, perhaps, and it continued with other prophets. But then in the second phase, it got confined in Abraham's progeny. But that individual aspect of a messenger has to be dealt with even in the post-Abrahamic era. So Abraham's progeny, in other words, has two statuses, I would say. So one as a collectivity, which is Abraham's nation. Of course, they have a collective existence, and then they have those Abrahamic prophets within them. So Jesus and Moses, just as in their collective capacity, they constitute Abraham's progeny, but in their individual capacities, they're also messengers of God. So for them, that law that we discussed last week will also apply. So this is how we have to understand it, and if we mix one with the other, we will not be able to make sense of a lot of verses in the Quran, and this would also end up in intermingling the responsibilities. And as I said, the other important thing is that in the case of the first responsibility, it is on many occasions it is through the agency of the Almighty. The instruments of justice become these natural elements, and sometimes the swords of the believers. But in this case, in the case of Abraham's progeny, it's never the progeny who is going to take any initiative or launch an attack. No, the Almighty says in their case, He will create circumstances such that all that they need to do is they need to adhere to God's commands in their collective capacity. If they do this, then all that they will need to do is, there's nothing further that they need to do. The rest is what God will do for them, and He will grant them the leadership of mankind. So I think we have to also understand that as far as the Quran is concerned, there is another verse in the Quran which says that on the day of judgment, the shuhada would be called upon. I'm just presently going to cite this verse also before you. But the thing that is important here to share is that Ustaz Ghamidi has related these shuhada, or these witnesses, which I'm just going to cite from a Quranic verse. They are actually the progeny of Abraham. So because of the status of shahada which the Almighty has granted them in this world, they will be called to give this shahada or witness on the day of judgment in the very manner the Rasul will be called for this purpose. So you see, just as a Rasul, that's one status or one category of preaching, and Abraham's progeny is another category of preaching. So thus, just as that category is going to materialize in this world, in the next world also. So just as messengers in their individual capacity, they will be called for the purpose of bearing witness to the truth. Abraham's progeny in their collective capacity will be also called to bear witness for the truth, and it will be they who will be first asked the question of their people's attitude towards the truth and whether they had actually fulfilled the responsibility of delivering the truth to others. So look how the Quran has mentioned this on the shahada, for which Abraham's progeny would be called on the day of judgment. So, and on that day the trumpet shall be sounded, and all who are in the heavens and on earth shall fall down fainting, except those who shall be spared by God. Then when the trumpet will be sounded again, and they shall suddenly rise and gaze around them, and the earth will shine with the light of their Lord, and the book in which deeds have been recorded will be laid open, and all the prophets and all those who were bestowed. Now is the important sentence in this Quranic verse, or these Quranic verses. So it says, and all those who were bestowed with the position of shahada shall be called in, and shall be judged with fairness, none shall be wronged. You see, this is how the Quran has said, how conclusively this evidence will be presented, that in this world, as far as Abraham's progeny is concerned, if they do their needful, God is going to do His part. So, awfu bi ahdi, ufi bi ahdikum. So, remember, awfu bi ahdikum, ufi. And the Quran says that if the Almighty cites Himself and says that if you fulfill your part of the deal, I will fulfill my part of the deal. And this is, of course, something that we have to realize, that as the progeny of Abraham, a responsibility in our collective capacity is also imposed, and as such, this is something that has to be looked into. So this is as far as this second category is concerned. Now let me come to the third category. And this third category is the category of the scholars of Islam. So scholars of religion, the scholars of Islam, they have an entirely different responsibility, and this is one tough responsibility. But first, let us see how it has been mentioned in the Quran. So it says, مَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ وَلِيُنْذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ. And it was not possible for all the believers to undertake this job. So why did not a few from every group among them come forward to gain sound knowledge in religion, and after attaining this knowledge, warn the people of their respective nations when they return to them, that they also may take heed. So you see, the directive of preaching relates to the scholars of the Muslim Ummah, because the words used are لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ. So they are the people who have a sound and a deep understanding of religion. So the Almighty has said that, of course, it's not possible for all of the Muslims to become scholars, but a few people from every community should come forward, and they should gain sound knowledge of religion and try to save their people from the punishment of hereafter through warning and admonition. Now, there are some things that we need to understand from this Quranic verse which Ustaz Ghamidi has pointed out, and I'd like to share some of the things that he has pointed out. So the first thing which is evident from this verse of Surah Tawbah is that the directive of preaching stated in it does not relate to every Muslim, and I've just clarified that. It begins with the very words that it was not possible for every Muslim. You see, مَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً. It was not possible for every Muslim. So this, of course, is an obvious reality. Neither is each person blessed with the same ability, nor does every person have the same opportunities in life. Not every Muslim can be expected to become a scholar of religion. Thus, the Almighty has clarified in this verse that not every person is required to become a scholar. However, some from among each of their groups should aspire to do so. The second important thing, if you keep your eye on the translation of this verse, is that those who want to take up the responsibility of warning their people, they must first gain sound understanding of religion. لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. This means that they must have a deep insight of religion. They should not be quacks. They should have a deep comprehension of what they are required to preach. So after the demise of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this comprehension can be obtained only through direct access to the Quran and Sunnah. So if you have to be a person who has to preach in a way that he is a scholarly person, then you have to have sound knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. So it is essential that those who take up this job must have a very thorough understanding of these original sources of religion. So these are the two things that are very evident. Another thing which is also evident from this verse is that once they have attained a masterful understanding of religion, the responsibility that the scholars have to discharge is that of warning. So you see, the words are لِيُنْزِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ. Inzar is an Arabic term which means to warn people. So it means that they are warned that one day they would have to give account of their deeds. So this is the same responsibility, if you remember, which has been imposed on prophets and messengers of God. So in this way, this responsibility of warning has been inherited by scholars, that once prophets and messengers pass away, then the responsibility they had of warning people is transferred to these scholars. So it is evident from that after Prophet Muhammad, this responsibility of inzar was entrusted to the scholars of our ummah. And after the termination of the institution of prophethood, it is our scholars who must continue to discharge this responsibility until the day of judgment. Now look at the fourth thing which has been mentioned in this verse. It says, وَلِيُنْزِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ, which means that the real addressee of a scholar is the nation to which he belongs. So it's not that he has to go to all parts of the world. It is basically لِيُنْزِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ, so that they warn the people of their respective nations. So the words specify the sphere, the circle of a scholar's preaching. They restrict him from leaving their real addressees and going after those who do not belong to them. And the fifth and final thing you can see, which occurs at the very end of the verse, is لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْسَرُونَ. It says that the objective of the preaching endeavor of the scholars should be to warn people about the displeasure of God. The words of the Quran, as you can see, are لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْسَرُونَ, that they may also take heed. So the implication is that people must take heed that if they show indifference, laziness, or arrogance regarding the obligations of their religion in their individual and collective affairs, they could be punished in this world and in the next too. It may be the desire of a scholar that the reins of power be transferred to pious people, and that Islam should reign supreme in the world and the word of God become dominant in every sphere of life. However, the basic objective of their preaching, as per this verse, is to warn people of the punishment and humiliation of the hereafter. So you see, the basic task which is cut out for these scholars is to warn people that they are going to face humiliation, ignominy, disgrace in the hereafter if they don't follow the commands of God. So we see that as far as this verse of Surah Tawbah is concerned, it requires scholars of Islam to keep alive their preaching endeavor according to their ability in every nation and every place with the spirit that has been mentioned earlier on. We have cited Surah Surah Hajj, it says, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ, which means that they should strive for the cause of God the way they should strive. So with deep concern and empathy, they should keep warning the people of their nation, as well as those in the authority, those who have the reins of authority, of their obligation and their duties. They should try to explain Islam to them at various levels. They should call them to the truth from various angles. They should warn them of the consequences of showing indifference to the truth. They should keep doing this until their last breath. So much so that the oppression of evil rulers should also not stop them from doing this. This is the greatest jihad which scholars of religion can always wage in this world. So the greatest jihad, and this is something of an eye-opener as well. So the Quran says that the greatest jihad is وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ, that you have to struggle for the cause of God in spreading the word of God. And at another instance it said وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا, which means that, referring to the Quran, the Almighty says that the greatest jihad that you can conduct is through this Quran, which means to explain this Quran, first understand it and then explain it, and this is jihadun kabira, which means this is the greatest jihad. So in this verse of Surah Tawbah, which is the source of various efforts of preaching and propagation, which have been undertaken in this ummah, it is a great favor of the Almighty that if you look at history, that there is no period of Muslim history which has remained devoid of people who have lit up the torch of truth in this desolate darkness of heresies and innovations. They do not care what people like and what they want. All their interest resides is with the truth. And they spend all their energy and skill to communicate the requirements of this truth to people. They demand nothing from people. Whatever they receive from their Lord, they faithfully and they generously give to other people. In every period of time, you'll find that they are regarded as the salt of the earth, as Jesus has said, the salt of the earth, the voice of the collective human conscience, and they are the best representatives of mankind. So it is this nature of preaching of the scholars that we have to understand, and it has also been made a subject of the Quran, that how is the style of preaching which Quran guides them to. In the first place, scholars should have so much faith in the truth that they go about preaching, that it should be the voice of their own hearts and the call of their own souls. Only after totally submitting themselves to the Almighty should they enter this field, and should they declare from all their heart and soul that they have professed faith in what they are calling people to. And therefore, in this regard, this is something of a huge responsibility. Secondly, there should be no contradiction between what they believe and what they actually do. So there has to be complete harmony in their beliefs and in their actions. Whatever ideology or truth they want to preach others should be first practiced by them. The Quran is absolutely clear that this is not the work of preachers who do not practice what they preach. So if you are a person, or a scholar is a person who does not practice what he preaches, then it is going to be an absolutely ineffective step on his part. It is the work of people whose preaching foremost addresses themselves. So in other words, what they preach others is addressed first to their own souls, and who force themselves to accept the truth which they understood from their Lord. So in its complete form. So the Quran reprimands the scholars of the Jews when in spite of being well versed with the Shariah and knowing full well as per the dictates of the Shariah, and those of sense and reason also, that they are much more liable to practicing religion. So they were on one occasion, the Quran says, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, which means that would you enjoin piety on others? أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ, and you forget your own selves. And then it says, وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ, even though you read the book. Yani, you are preachers to others, but as far as your own selves are concerned, you forget about your own selves. You just preach other people, and you do not practice what you preach. And you are people who are entrusted with this responsibility. And the verse ends on a very severe note. It says, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, have you no sense? So you see how important it is for a scholar to understand fully the fact that their actions must match their beliefs. Their actions must be in harmony with their beliefs. And finally, viewers, they should never show a compromising attitude towards the truth. This is something which the Quran has stressed. You must not compromise on the truth. the smallest of truths that becomes evident to them should be wholeheartedly accepted. Their tongue should bear witness to it, and they should present it to the world in a majestic manner, in full glory, with full splendor, and disregard the reproachings of a reproacher. Never they should try to change or distort the truth. All directives of the Quran and Sunnah and the complete guidance they provide should be presented by them to people, and whatever they find against these two sources of Islam should be rejected. So this does not mean that they should not wait for opportune moments to present religion. Yes, of course they should, because this is how religion is preached. But the fact is that they have to be wise. They have to wait for the opportune time. It has to be the right instance in which they have to present their own advice. But they must never conceal the truth, because remember, this was something which the scholars of the Jews, they did so, and the Quran reprimanded them. They scolded them that you are trying to conceal the truth. You hide a part of it and you reveal a part of it. The part that you reveal is the one that suits you, and as far as the other part is concerned, because it doesn't suit you, you hide it. So the Almighty has said that as far as prophets who have been sent for this inzar or warning is concerned, they are not meant to put through any discomfort. I mean, it's not that they'll not be put through any discomfort. It is only befitting for them to discharge their duty, disregarding the reproaches of any person who might reproach them, who might criticize them. So this is a brief summary, dear viewers, and I will end my session here. We will have another session on this preaching Sharia. But just to sum up what we have discussed today, you've discussed two categories of preaching. We already discussed the first category in our last session. The two categories that we discussed today, one of them was the category in which the progeny of Abraham has been given this responsibility. And we also discussed distinctly how the Quran makes it clear that this progeny, the way it has been historically, we have brought it forth, the way we have seen them. First, this responsibility was given to the progeny of Isaac, and then to the progeny of Ishmael. But of course, both of them are Banu Abraham, which means they are the children of Abraham. And then we also discussed the responsibility of scholars of religion, that they have to restrain themselves and contain themselves and restrict themselves to warning, and they have to base their warning on the Quran. They must have a deep understanding of religion. They must not leave their nation and start preaching other people. It has to be their nation, because the Quran says they should come back to your own nation and warn them. And the nature of their warning, of course, has to be to warn people of the hereafter. So inshallah, in our next sessions, we will take up the remaining categories. The two of them remain. One of them is the preaching responsibility of the rulers of a Muslim state. And the other responsibility, which might relate more to all of us, is the responsibility of preaching, which a common individual or a common man, a common person, or a common Muslim needs to have to fulfill. So I will now close my session here, and if you have any questions, please bring them forth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our first question comes from Imran. Imran, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. Thank you very much. Mashallah, very good explanation. The first question I have as part of the question is from Surah Tawbah, where it says the scholars, Ta'ifatun liyatafaqahu fid din. Then it says that they will return to their people. إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ لَأَلَّهُمْ يَهْذَرُونَ. So this لَأَلَّهُمْ يَهْذَرُونَ is for their people, right? For their nations.
Right. For the nations. So that they too abstain, they too take heed. So it's towards the nation. These words actually relate to the people to whom they will preach.
Very good, thank you. And then Surah Furqan, you read this ayah, jihadan kabira, fala tutil kafirin wa jahidhum bihi jihadan kabira. Does Quran explain where elsewhere what is jihadan kabira means?
You see, this verse itself says so. So just reflect on the word. It says jahidhum bihi bil Quran jihadan kabira. Conduct that huge or great jihad or struggle through this Quran. So it is actually referring to the fact that the greatest jihad is this intellectual jihad, in which you are trying to warn people, in which you're trying to make them realize that one day they will be held accountable. And you're not using any history or anecdotes or culture to do that. You are using the Quran So the words are Jahidhum bil Quran. And you strive through this Quran, and this effort through the Quran has been called as Jihad in Kabira, the great jihad.
I see this is he is going back to Quran then. Thank you.
It's
Thank you.
back to the Quran. Yeah.
Barakallah fiqh. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Adil Qureshi, please go ahead.
I guess I'll start with the off-topic questions first and hold the on-topic questions and hold off the off-topic for later. So I have a couple on-topic questions. Dr. Saab, you translated Summa Radadna Asfala Safilin as when he wanted to become low. Where did you come up with that part of translation, that when he wanted to become low? Because I think it's not in the Arabic.
It's found in Safilin. Radadnahu asfala safilin. So when they wanted to become so, God reverted them to this position. I mean, this is something which is you'll find in the verse itself, suppressed in the verse.
I thought it's mafule mutlaq. Safilin is not mafule mutlaq.
No, it is asfala safilin. I mean, safilin is the, I mean, asfal is the governed noun, which is the muzaf, and safilin is the muzaf ilayh of that. And so you see, this is a law which has been mentioned elsewhere in the Quran, that when the Almighty only turns people to the lowest of the low when they themselves become worthy of it as a punishment. So these parallel verses of the Quran, they give you this deduction that has been made here. It's not that God is going to make them do so. And the other important thing that you have to realize is summa radadnahu, which means that they were not in this position. They ended up in this position because of their own misdeeds. So earlier on, God created people in the best of molds, at Teen, at Zaytun, at Tur Sinin, at the Mount of Sinai, at city of Mecca. They were in this glorious position. But when they themselves decided to go low, God said, okay, this is what you want, so this is what you get. So this is something that you understand from the context and from parallel verses, that when the Almighty punishes people, it's not that He punishes them, without any reason. It's only when they themselves become worthy of it that they do so. This is something very similar mentioned elsewhere in the Quran, that He seals your heart. He puts a seal on your heart. But we know from the Quran that He only He does so, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. He only leads those persons astray, or He only seals the hearts of those people who themselves have proved to be fasiq or defiant.
Right, sir. So the second question is about this news that Allah is giving to the people of Shahada, that if you follow this, I will grant you rizq from above the heavens as well as below your feet. I just want to make sure or not to confuse it with a regular Muslim, a non-Ishmaelite Muslim, if he's doing good deeds, or if he's going by Allah's hidayah in this world, it's not necessarily that he will also be rewarded the rizq from above the heavens. Or
you see, this relates to the collective capacity. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ أَقَامُوا التَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ. If you take out this verse from the Quran, you'll find out that it addresses the Israelites in their collective capacity. It's not in their individual capacity. A person is not being given this glad tiding. The Israelites as a collectivity are given that if they adhere to the responsibility of the Torah and the Injil, they follow the commands of God the way these books mention, then this is how the Almighty is going to reward them.
Right, but an average Pakistani who's a non-Ishmaelite right now, it's not necessary that if he does all of these things, he will.
Of course not. No. Remember these verses. You see, the Banu Abraham, or the progeny of Abraham, is the progeny of Abraham in its collective form. It is, this promise does not relate to individuals in their individual capacity. It relates to them in their collective capacity. So the Banu Abraham, of course, the Israelites and the Ishmaelites, they succeeded them. And today, of course, the Ishmaelites are scattered all over the world. Yes, we have the Hashemite kingdom of Morocco, of parts of Jordan and some other areas. But it's not that they are in the form of one collectivity. They are all scattered. So the promise of the Quran is that if the Ishmaelites, and then those, of course, people like us who follow suit, and although they are not Ishmaelites, but they are like secondary people who enter into their folds, of course, they would be part of this as well.
Right. So, answer my last question is so about the scholars of Islam and the fact that they can do inzar to their own nations, to their own communities. That inzar is applicable for both the communities who are Muslim as well as non-Muslims, or their inzar is specific to the people who have not yet accepted the faith, non-Muslim.
No, it relates to the Qawm. I mean, the Qawm is an amalgam of all sorts of people. It could be people of their own faith. There could be people of other faiths as well. So the denomination is not spelled out here. The word nation comprises the fact that whoever are there are to be warned by them. Thus, for example, if you have people who are non-believers or belong to other religions, it is their responsibility that they will also, preach them. And of course, in their own community, they might be having Muslims as well or believers as well, so they will preach them as well. So the content would be different. For example, people who are already Muslims, for them the content might be to clear misconceptions, to answer their questions, to urge them to do righteous deeds, because of course we need this urge as well. But for the non-believers, the content would be, of course, different. They will be, discussing the issues, what is the difference between the last version of Islam maybe or the previous versions. Why is it that they are required to profess faith in the last prophet? What is the difference between the guidance of the Torah and the Quran? So the content would be different.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Sattar Ahmed, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum
Yes,
assalam.
walaikum
Can you hear
assalam.
me? Yeah. So my question, it's off topic. So it's kind of related to entertainment.
Sattar Ahmed, I'm really sorry. We're not taking off-topic questions right now because we have a bunch of on-topic questions. If we have
No
time
problem.
towards the end, we can take off-topic questions then. I'd also
Sure.
like to let the participants know that we have Ask Dr. Saleem next week, so you can bring forth any questions that you have in case we run out of time today too.
Okay, sure. No problem.
But you can keep your hand raised in case you have time. We'll take your off-topic question.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you so much. Asif Ali, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. This ayah number 124 in Surah Baqarah, the word which is basically used is, in Qala wa min zurriyati. So basically, before that, Qala inni ja'iluka lin-nasi imama. So here the word imama is used. So progeny of Abraham is basically, Hazrat Ibrahim is on the status of imam, and his progeny has the responsibility of the or obligation of the preaching. So the progeny of Ishmael, when we look into that, it's up to the last prophet, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it means that after the last prophet, what will be the status of the progeny of Ishmael? I mean, it means that the progeny of Ishmael, what is the rationale behind it that, okay, after Muhammad, there is no special status given to progeny of Ishmael like it was given to progeny of Abraham?
No, this is precisely what I've been explaining. The progeny of Ishmael has the same status as the progeny of Abraham. I mean, they are the progeny of Abraham. The progeny of Abraham has two branches. So one of them proceeded from Isaac, the other proceeded from Ishmael. The only difference is that the progeny of Isaac, they were given this responsibility first. And when they failed miserably in the responsibility, it was taken away and given to the progeny of Ishmael. So that is continuing. I mean, this is still there. And in their collective capacity, if they don't adhere to the truth, we've just seen that they would be humiliated in this world. And this is what is happening today, actually. Both the Israelites and the Ismailites, I mean, you can see that both of them are in this disgraceful position of subjugation to other nations of the world. And as far as the verse is concerned, Izibtala Ibrahima, the verse that you just cited, it does not relate to the progeny of Abraham. It actually starts off this whole preaching category by giving us this introduction that first Abraham in his individual capacity was made the leader. And he then asked this question that would this leadership be transferred to my children as well? Then God said, well, only those of them who are not wrongdoers. So basically, this verse that you just cited, it does not deal with the progeny of Abraham. It deals with Abraham himself. The progeny of Abraham verse is the one that I cited earlier of Surah Al Imran, which says, "Inna Allah hastafa Adama wa Nuhu wa ala Ibrahim." So ala Ibrahim is progeny of Abraham. Al Ibrahim, al means children. So Al Ibrahim, that is the verse that you need to understand, is the primary verse in this regard.
So the children of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are saying that they are not fulfilling their responsibility. So
It's not the children of Muhammad. It's the progeny of Ishmael. So you see, it's not the children of Ibrahim. We're starting about the progeny of Ishmael. So when between Ishmael and Muhammad, there's almost 2,500 years. So in these 2,500 years, they were following the religion of Abraham. And when the Israelites were deposed after the passing away of, after Jesus, he was the last Jew, he was the last prophet of the Israelites. The whole torch was given now to the Ishmaelites. So basically, it is the Ishmaelites who are still, they are entrusted even today with this responsibility, which of course they are not fulfilling, but they are entrusted with this responsibility. First, they are not even, you just cannot even identify them in a collectivity. Yes, they are there, here and there scattered. They are not even in their collective capacity. They don't exist as such. And secondly, the next task would be that when they start to exist in their collective capacity, then they'll have to adhere to the commands of God. And if they do so, then the promise of God is that without, taking any other measure, without launching any onslaught, the Almighty will create circumstances such that they will become the leaders. All that they need to do is become a collectivity and then adhere to God's commands. This is precisely the same thing which was promised to the Israelites.
And that basically uprise, or you can say, let's say, if they will collectively come together and then go back to the promise which of the God, it doesn't mean that materially or in science and technology or in other.
It doesn't mean that. No. That is not, as far as the Quran is concerned, it does not talk about that. It says that as far as your own, the fact that you're going to lead mankind is concerned, you need to follow the commands of God. I see, if you remember the citation that I presented before you of the book of Deuteronomy, you'll find them, it specifically says the commands of God.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it doesn't mean any science and technology.
It doesn't. You see, that is something of a. This is something of another. This is a different area. Of course, a person or a nation who is going to rise, then of course that rise is also to be governed by some of the other phenomena. But then that is a phenomena which does not relate to the nation of Abraham. It relates to a nation in general. For example, people who belong to a particular country or to a particular area. So that particular advancement relates to individual countries. So that is the promise which is mentioned elsewhere in the Quran. And it says that Inna Allah la yughayyiru, the Almighty does not change a nation's status unless it changes its own status. So that is mentioned elsewhere. And the word Qawm, or the way it has been mentioned there, it refers to people in their collective capacities. It does not refer to the progeny of Abraham. So you see, we have to make these three distinctions. One, individual messengers of God, they have a specific position. Two, we have the progeny of Abraham. Three, we have another law for a general rise and fall of nations, which means that they must adhere to knowledge and wisdom. And within this knowledge, of course, also comes scientific wisdom. But then this particular promise, this third one, does not relate to the progeny of Abraham. It relates to the general principle of rise and fall of other nations, or generally, today, because we don't have, we have nation states, so we can say that people or countries who adhere to this principle of scientific advancement, they will rise. Of course, they have to have other traits as well, but yes, this would be one of their traits. But for the progeny of Abraham, this is not even mentioned there. So the progeny of Abraham in their collective capacity, all that they need to do is to adhere to the commands of God.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Dr. Saleem, Riyaz, please go ahead. And since we're running short on time, we have 15 minutes remaining. Please limit yourself to one question so we can get through everyone's.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Dr. Sahab, in the Surah Hajj, the ayah you mentioned, so is it the addressee is the Prophet Ismail, or is it also Quraysh also?
the end of Surah Hajj. I mean, of course, the Quraysh are being told. I mean, the Bani Ishmael, the people who were present there, they are being told. So basically, it's a Meccan surah. So we have to realize that this is a book this is a surah which belongs to the 3rd chapter of the Quran, which starts off with Surah Yunus and ends on Surah Nur. So except for Surah Nur, all the surahs are Meccan, and Surah Hajj is a Meccan surah as well, and therefore the addressees here are the Quraysh.
So is it saying that we have given you the deen, there are no hardships? So does it mean that there were hardship for the Jews in their religion, what the Sharia was given?
I mean, it says that Millat Abikum Ibrahim, Huwajtabakum Ma Ja'ala alaykum fi deen min haraj, which of course means that now some of the difficult parts or the difficult aspects that were made upon you, I mean, you were required to follow them as a result of your own rebelliousness, they have been taken away from you. So we have now eased it for you. Now you have to understand that you are succeeding these people, and as far as your own success is concerned, if you also, if you follow the path of God, then no extra burden will be laid upon you, as was the case with some of the previous nations.
So in other words, the hardship was given to them as a punishment, right?
As a punishment. Yes, we know from the Quran, because at one instance the Quran says, Zalika jazaynahum bi baghyihim. This is what we did to them because of their rebelliousness.
Thank you. We'll take some chat questions, and then if we still have time, we can come back to the remaining raised hands. So the first chat question asks, since Jews and Christians as well as Muslims are all progenies of Abraham, then are we supposed to take it in this way that Christians are prevailing financially and politically because they're following God's guidelines?
No, this is another law of the Almighty which relates to the progeny of Abraham, and that is that which says in Surah Al-Imran, وَجَعَلُوا الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوكَ فَوْقَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ, which means that the followers of Jesus are always going to prevail on people who denied him, which are the Israelites. So basically, this says it says that as far as the progeny of Abraham is concerned, because the Israelites had a tradition that so many numerous prophets came to them, one after the other. And now that they are after the life of Jesus and they have tried to crucify him, but God saved him from this crucifixion, the result of this is that the Almighty has decided that in this world, as long as this world goes on, the Christians will always prevail on the Jews. So this is another law which is the corollary of the law of the progeny of Abraham, that because of the fact that the Jews intentionally denied Jesus now, so therefore now they can never prevail on his followers. So you see, the words of the Quran are Jailul lazina tabauka fawqa allazina kafaru ila yawm al-qiyamah. And God is going to make the followers of Jesus prevail over people who denied him.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, and it's related to the ayah that says, indeed, those who trade Allah's covenant and their oaths for a fleeting gain will have no share in the hereafter. Allah will neither speak to them, nor look at them, nor purify them on the day of judgment, and they will suffer a painful punishment. And so the question asks, is this ayah specific for any group of people?
Well, I need to look up this verse because, see, I just could not give a comment unless I see the context. So this verse has occurred 3 or 4 times in the Quran in various contexts. So if the person who is asking, he or she can contact me, because I'm not sure which of the verses he or she might be referring to, because it has occurred in the Quran quite a number, at least a few times. And I would need to look up the context before replying.
They're saying it's in the 3rd surah, so Surah Al-Imran.
Yeah, so I would need to look at the context of the verses before and after, and then I can reply.
Okay, so then I'd request this participant to reach out to Dr. Saleem directly. The next question asks, if scholars from each group are required to preach in their respective people, what would be the practical implication of this? Is a person required to return to their hometown and preach over there instead of keeping learning and working in the company of other scholars in an institute?
So you see, now we need to understand the word qawm or nation. It can have various connotations. Thus, for example, there was a time in which people would return to their own people, and it was that geographical boundary which was essential that they follow, that they stay within their people. But then now, I can see that there is a development that has taken place, and we might need to review our understanding. And that is now, basically, it's like language dividing nations. So formerly, it was geographical boundaries which made a nation, and as a result, for example, if I belong to, let's say, Iran or to Persia, Persia and Iran are the same thing, for example, Indonesia, or to any geographical unit. So my responsibility would be within that geographical unit. But now preaching and the way communication is developed is that, we have become language-based communities. For example, Chinese community is a nation, English-speaking peoples are one nation, French-speaking people are another nation. So perhaps now, this is how I understand it, that the word nation has to be understood in terms of what it now constitutes. So now it has risen above geographical boundaries, and it does seem that it is more appropriate that people should now demarcate their nations or their own boundaries as people who speak their language. So, for example, if I am a person who is more adept in German, or I have learnt religion as a scholar in German, then my sphere of preaching as a scholar would be all the Germans or people who understand the German language, even if they are situated out of Germany. They could be in Switzerland, they could be in other parts of the world as well. Because of the fact that now communication has transcended these borders. It's not that we are confined to the borders in which we live. It's now like a global phenomenon. It's like one big place. So therefore we are now, so to speak, one nation, but we are now divided amongst each other more on the basis of languages. So this is how I understand that basically today this concept of nationhood, the way Quran speaks of here, relates to the language that scholar speaks, and as such all people who speak that language will now become his addressees. Of course, this would vary from the stature of a person to another person. A person could be of a stature that he could just address a few, people who belong to that big category of, if I continue with my example, of people who speak German, or he could extend that ambit to all German-speaking peoples. But as I said, if he speaks to German-speaking peoples who are outside Germany and they inhabit other parts of the world, it does seem to me that it should still be subsumed under this verse.
So inshallah, see you all next week and take care.